I've seen a lot of disturbing movies like Martyrs, where a cult pushes people to the limits of human pain in search of transcendence, or Cannibal Holocaust, which I had to stop watching during the turtle scene. It's really hard to forget. Now, you may be thinking, what are you doing watching all these disturbing movies? Well, it's because I've seen a few TikTok videos saying, don't watch this movie late at night. But none of that prepared me for the strange thing about the Johnsons. And once again, this movie is really morbid and contains very sensitive topics. It's a 30-minute short film about an incestuous, abusive relationship between a father and his son. And you may be thinking to yourself that it's the father who's doing the abusing. Well, in this short film, it's not. And of course, it's directed by none other than Ari Aster. You may be familiar with some of his work, such as Hereditary or Midsummer. However, this one is one of his earlier works, coming out in 2011. And not to glaze the man, but Ari Aster is one of the best directors when it comes to making you feel uncomfortable, like you're watching something that you're not supposed to be watching. And whenever someone asks me what my favorite horror movie is, I always say Hereditary. I know, a very original answer, and I mostly say it because one scene caught me off guard, and you probably know which one I'm talking about. The scene where Peter's driving home with his sister in the back and she's having an allergic attack, and to get some fresh air, his sister rolls down the window and sticks her head out of it, and in the next moment it's gone. Peter is in complete shock. He drives back home and leaves the body in the car, and then the next morning we hear this really guttural screaming coming from his mother. And that's what Ari Aster does best. He doesn't just scare you, he forces you to sit in horror. And after watching Hereditary, I went down the Ari Aster rabbit hole, and then I watched Midsummer, and then when Beau is Afraid came out, I immediately bought tickets and went to the theaters to watch it. Now that movie is completely something else, and I don't recommend watching that movie with your family or just any close relatives. There's a lot of dick jokes, and yeah, you should just watch it for yourself alone. I guess you could say that I'm pretty much a big fan of Ari Aster's. Now, the strange thing about the Johnsons is only 30 minutes long, and those 30 minutes feel long as hell. And before things get really weird, make sure to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's go into the story of the strange thing about the Johnsons, and trust me, there is something absolutely strange about them. So the family featured in this movie, the Johnsons, are a suburban family, and everything about them seems normal. They're just a regular, typical upper middle class family. And the father is extremely well educated, being a poet. But soon there will be a secret so taboo that it defies explanation. This is exactly where the story gets a little too weird to explain. It's literally the opening few minutes. The father, Sidney, catches his son Isaiah yanking his chain. He just opens his door without knocking and catches him right there and then in the act. Sidney reacts awkwardly but lovingly. He sits down on the bed and gives his son a heartfelt talk about how masturbation is normal and healthy and nothing to be ashamed of, and that it's okay to have boundaries. It's sweet and funny just by how awkward it is. But then right at the end of the scene, we see what Isaiah was getting off to. It was a photo of his father. Now I assume by what happens later in the film that Isaiah misinterprets his father's speech, and he ends up loving his father a little too much. And of course, this absolutely caught me off guard. I couldn't believe what I was watching, and trust me, this film gets more uncomfortable in just a few moments. Fast forward 14 years, and now Isaiah is a grown man and is married to a beautiful wife, Marianne. But the twisted obsession with his father hasn't gone away. In fact, now it's completely escalated, and Isaiah's taboo fetish has manifested into something beyond unholy. During a family photo, he whispers into his dad's ear, "Thank you for everything, Pops," and reaches down to grab his bottom. Now the father looks startled when Isaiah does this, making it clear that he's not comfortable with this at all. And then the scene changes to following Sydney's wife, Joan, asking all the guests, "Have you seen Sydney and Isaiah?" And while asking the guests, everything seems completely normal. Everyone is in a good mood, but that will soon change for Joan in just a few moments. Looking through a tiny hole in a fence, she catches her son undressing her husband. and her son drops to his knees to unbuckle the husband's belt. And you can guess what the son does to his father. Joan is in complete disbelief by what she just saw. She has a panic attack before fixing herself to go back to the party, completely ignoring the situation, brushing it off like it didn't happen. Behind the facade of normalcy, Isaiah is emotionally and physically abusing his own father, and sometime later, Sydney, being a poet, begins writing a memoir about the abuse, titled The Cocoon Man. He puts himself in the blame and questions what he should have done differently. To condemn him, I must first condemn myself, he writes. And it's that line, that awful tragic logic, that captures the psychological grip Isaiah has over him. While Sydney is writing the memoir, his wife is down below cooking dinner on the first floor with Isaiah and his wife. Now, Isaiah's wife asks Joan if she needs any help with dinner at all, and Joan replies, no, everything's fine, everything's under control. Now, I assume here she's not talking about dinner being made that's under control, rather it's the situation regarding her family. Now, while she turns a blind eye to the situation now, we'll later see something else unfold. Oh yeah, she also asks Isaiah to grab his dad for dinner. And then there's this really intense scene where Isaiah is approaching his father's workroom as Sydney is writing his memoir about all the abuse. Sydney hears his son going up the stairs and going towards his room, so he tries to close the window on his computer where he's writing the memoir. And as he's trying to close the application he's writing on, it's just not working. He keeps getting hit with an error message. And it does a really good job at building this sense of suspense. Anyways, crisis averted because Isaiah just stops at the doorframe and says it's time for Din Din. The way Isaiah says Din Din is just so innocent and childlike, it really threw me off guard when I heard him say that. The actor for Isaiah, Brian Greenhouse, does a really great job at portraying this weird psycho. One minute he's a toxic, abusive manipulator, and the next he's acting like a child when he said it's time for Din Din. And then the family eats dinner all together, and at the table Joan grabs her husband's hand and Isaiah looks at his dad with jealousy. So down below in the table, Isaiah massages his father's foot with his own foot. Yeah, this movie is just something. And then later that night, Sydney actually decides to print out the copy of The Cocoon Man. He leaves a copy on the bed of his bedroom with a note attached to it saying, "Forgive me, Joan." Now Sydney at this time is dressed up like he's going out somewhere, and it's never really specified, but by my own speculation I assume he's going off to maybe unalive himself. I mean, it's clearly shown in the scene he's not holding anything, or possibly he's going to authorities. Now while on his way out, Isaiah runs into him and says that his bathroom's not working. Isaiah asks his dad if he could use his restroom, but his mother's taking a shower. Isaiah said, "It's fine, I can just wait." Sydney tries everything to get his son away from the room, but none of it works. Sydney is absolutely powerless in this abusive relationship and just lets his son go into the bedroom. Sydney knows that his son will find the memoir and waits for him in his office room. And when Isaiah does find it, he's absolutely furious and goes straight to his father. He says manipulative things like, "I love you, but this is making it hard." And it's really sad to see the father here say I'm sorry for something that he really doesn't have control over. I mean, Isaiah is just straight up abusing his father. And now it's New Year's and Isaiah is kissing his wife, but while kissing his wife, he's looking at his father with lustful eyes. And that part made me feel really icky and just disgusted. It's just really weird and hard to watch. It's just hard to watch, man. And I assume now Isaiah is really lustful for his dad, because as he's getting ready to leave with his wife, he breaks something made out of glass and says that I have to stay and help my family clean up. His wife questions him, "You're gonna what?" And while she's saying this, she looks like she knows that something is off. Now Marianne, Isaiah's wife, her character isn't really explored in this 30-minute short film, but I'm sure that if this was a full feature-length film, they would have delved more into her character, and we would have seen more of her reaction to this whole entire Johnsons situation. Now the next sequence of events does contain a lot of heavier depictions, and it does get really intense. Upstairs, while taking a bath, Sydney is listening to a self-help tape, and on the tape I'm pretty sure that there is a photo cover of the director Ari Aster on there. I mean, I'll show some pictures but it's very obvious that it's him, right? I mean, I'm not going crazy here, am I? The self-help tape is saying very original stuff. It says if you're gonna wake up with a negative attitude, you're gonna have a bad day. If you're gonna wake up with a positive attitude, you're gonna have a good day. Isaiah tries to enter the restroom where Sydney's taking his bath out, but the door's locked. Isaiah, trying to open the door, says, "You know how I feel about locked doors." Now that's something an abusive partner might say, or an abusive parent might say, in order to invade someone's privacy. I think it really drives the whole point of the roles being reversed in this abusive relationship. It's a topic I see talked a lot about in discussions about this film. Sydney, unaware of his son trying to get inside, is absolutely horrified when Isaiah does break the door down. And Sydney lets out this really guttural scream that's still with me to this day. And then Isaiah proceeds to assault his father. In the other bedroom, Joan is watching TV, completely aware of what is happening just by hearing her husband's screams. She turns up the volume on her TV, once again showing her ignorance of the situation, but she does have a very horrified look on her face. And the next day, it seems that Sydney has finally reached the point where he's just fed up with everything and decides to leave with a copy of the Cocoon Man in his hands. And while Sydney is trying to leave, he is stopped by Isaiah, and Isaiah once again gives a very manipulative speech. He says really gross things like they shouldn't be afraid of what they have because what they have is special. Yeah, it's just really gross, and Sydney shrugs it off and runs out the door. But as he runs out to the street, he's hit by an oncoming van, where he's ultimately killed, and Isaiah runs to his father crying and holding his now dead body. And I don't know why, but I find it really absurd when the mother tries to get close and Isaiah says, "Get away from him," and tells her to call the emergency services. And now it's Sydney's funeral, and Joan looks absolutely distant from everyone. She's building up the courage to finally confront Isaiah about everything. And when Joan does confront her son, he's trying on his father's clothes while looking at a picture of him. Joan questions him why his father was crying when he drove him back from prom night. Isaiah brushes it off, saying, "I can't remember one specific moment from a specific night," once again being the master male manipulator. And then Joan, feeling a very intense mix of emotions, calls Isaiah a monster and tells him that he killed his own father. And as Joan is trying to leave the room, Isaiah grabs her hand and a little slap fight ensues. And in between the little slap fight they're having, Isaiah says something really gross and I feel sick thinking about it. He says, "I loved him better than you ever did," and then the fight gets really intense. Joan attempts to gouge out her son's eyes with her nails, but then she gets pushed back. She gets pushed back to a desk where she grabs a knife and stabs Isaiah. However, Isaiah doesn't go down that easily and grabs his mother and drags her to the fireplace. Now it's very clear that Isaiah's intent is to kill his mother. However, Joan regains control over the fight by grabbing a fire poker and then stabbing Isaiah again and again and again, all while letting out her emotions. This scene is really suspenseful and just really dramatic. I can't believe that the whole entire film builds up to this really intense fight, man. I've seen this film like 3 different times with 3 different people and it still really haunts me. Every time I watch it, I still feel the same amount of disgust I felt from the first time I watched it. And once again, Ari Aster does a really excellent job at making you sit in the horror and just allowing you to consume everything you just watched, and you still feel like, what the hell did I just watch? Yeah, I'm really gonna need to take a shower after watching this one with really hot water, and just to really once again hit home the feeling of what the hell did I just watch. The copy of Cocoon Man is in the fireplace, burning as the credits roll, and then there's this calm jazz song that plays and it's really just haunting. Anyways, that was the strange thing about the Johnsons, and I'm not even watching it, I'm just reading off a script and talking over talking points, and I still feel like I need a really hot shower. The strange thing about the Johnsons isn't scary in a traditional sense. There are no monsters or jump scares. Well, there is a monster, but it forces you to confront something taboo, something deeply disturbing, something that most films don't really touch on. And Ari Aster makes sure you don't look away. It's a film you really don't plan on watching it ever again, and even if you do decide to do that, it's also going to be a film you're never ever going to be able to forget. And of course, it's going to be something I will never ever forget. Anyways, this has been Keen, and I hope you found this video enjoyable despite the topics about it. And make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all later.